Welcome back to another edition of the Quantum Yoga Podcast. Very excited to have Dr. Gaétan Chevalier on the program today. And Dr. Chevalier received his Ph.D. from the University of Montreal in atomic physics and laser spectroscopy in 1988. After 4 years of research at UCLA in the field of nuclear fusion, he became professor and director of research at the California Institute for Human Science in '93 for 10 years, where he conducted research on human physiology and electrophysiology, as well as being director of the Biophysics department and research director. Currently, he is lead faculty there, a visiting scholar in the Department of Family Medicine and Public Health at UCSD, director of the Earthing Institute since 2009, and research director at Psy-Tek Labs since 2010. Thank you, Dr. Chevalier, for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, the bulk of our conversation is going to revolve around your current position as director of the Earthing Institute, and earthing as it affects the human body, physiologically, the biofield of the human body, and all of the surrounding details. And I wonder if we could just start with an introduction to what earthing is, what grounding is. Lay that out for people.
Yes, thank you, Jonathan. So earthing, or also called grounding, is basically being in physical contact with the earth. So our body physically touching the earth, or being in contact with the earth through some equipment that is conducting. For example, you can have a conducting mat, have your feet on it, and there's a wire that goes, let's out your window, and connected to a grounding rod out there. And so you're still in contact with the earth, and you still get the benefits of being in contact with the earth. So that, in a nutshell, that's what grounding is. I mean, barefoot on the earth, or in the ocean. Swimming in the ocean is very grounding. A very nice way of grounding yourself. So in a nutshell, that's what grounding is.
And why is that even important? There is, I'm on your website for the Earthing Institute, earthinginstitute.net. There's a long list of studies that you guys have on the research page. Why is that even important, and something that was initially studied in the first place?
Yes, well, then a little bit of history. So we go back to the rediscoverer, because that's not a totally new idea, but the rediscoverer for our modern time is Clint Ober. Clint Ober was an executive in the cable industry, made a lot of money there, but then at some point got very ill and almost died of an infection of the liver following, I think it's a root canal. And after that, his life changed, and he saw life almost, he had a kind of a near-death experience. After that, his perspective on life has changed, and he was trying to help people in a deeper way. And he had pain, he was taking medication, he was taking sleeping pills and stuff. And so, but knowing how the cables work for TV cables, that they need to be shielded and they need to be grounded, at least the outside layer needs to be grounded for the quality of a signal, and thinking that the human body is also bioelectric. So one day he was sitting at a bench and he saw people walking in running shoes. He was himself in running shoes. And so you wonder if there is an effect of being disconnected with the earth, and what would that do? Because in the past we evolved in contact with the earth. So he decided just to do an experiment, buy some conducting tape, wrap that around his bed, and then take a wire and a rod and plant that outside. And he always needed, sleeping pills to be able to sleep. And so he just lay out on the bed and and had a voltmeter just to measure how the voltage dropped, pretty dramatically. And just the next thing he's done is that he's waking up, and it's the next day. So that surprised him, and that he didn't have any pain also when he woke up, and that he slept so well. So he decided to repeat the experiment. And then he had some friend who had similar problems. And so he decided to try with them, and they got good results. So that's how it started. Then it started to spread. And Clint went to, from where he was, it was he was in Arizona at the time. Sedona, I think. Then he decided to go west and see if the people he can find someone, a researcher or someone who can help him understand what's going on. So he went to UCLA, where he was turned down, and most places where he were turned down. But at some point, that was 2003, I was director of research at the California Institute for Human Science, and he came and did a presentation on the benefit of earthing. By that time, he had found a nurse to help him. Would do some kind of a pilot project where they would take questionnaire of people and have them grounded and see if they improved their condition. And again, he had very good results. So he didn't have any formal research at the time, but it's clear that he had something. So, but I listened to that, and I said, well, that's a very simple thing to do. So simple that it should have been, discovered a long time ago, if it was real. So I was kind of skeptical about the earthing thing, but not totally. At the California Institute for Human Science, it's a pretty open community. We're embracing all kind of ideas, and we're not rejecting anything unless it's tested and proven, that it works, or if it doesn't work. So at some point, one of his Clint's associate, came to me and said, we want to do a research project, and we're ready, to fund it. So I said, fine, so we'll do a project. And that's what got me started. And so we designed a project where we were measuring brain wave, muscle tension, heart rate variability. We also have an equipment from Japan to measure the energy flow in the meridians. And to my surprise, we had excellent results. We had a normalization of the brain waves. There were relaxation there. The muscle tension normalizes, and the meridian flow of energy improved. So I was like, wow, this is good. So we published that paper. It's one, I think it's in, let's see, in the website, it's a paper 19 and 20, the effect of earthing on human physiology. We published two papers, one on the biofeedback type measurements, which is like brain wave, muscle tension, heart rate, respiration rate, that kind of stuff. And another one on the meridian effect and how the energy was affected in the meridians from the person. So it was an eye-opener for me, but I was not totally convinced. I had some issues about the equipment being grounded, and maybe there was some ground loop or something. However, we repeated the experiment a couple of years later with more sophisticated equipment. That, for example, the data receiving unit was battery powered, and it was transferring its data to a computer through fiber optics. So there's no way that there could have been, some ground loop of any type. And we found, again, excellent results. This time we had even more machines. We had blood oxygenation, we had skin conductance, we redid the brain wave also with more channels. And again, we got best results, and these again were published in a paper In the website, it's number 18, change in pulse rate, respiratory rate, blood oxygenation, perfusion index, skin conductance, and their variability induced during and after grounding human subjects for 40 minutes. We had all these results, beautiful results, grounding people only for 40 minutes. So it does something. To my surprise, it's very helpful, and I've seen, during that project, some subjects, for example, coming in. One of them was my friend. My friend came in as a potential subject, but I think it was before we were still exploring how we're going to do this research. Anyway, he came in, and so we asked him just casually if he had pain. And he said, yes, I have arthritis of the thumbs. And so I didn't know this. He said, wow, okay, so from 0 to 10, 0 being no pain and 10 being you're ready to jump a bridge, where are you at? He said, my pain level now in one thumb is 7 and the other is 8. I said, wow, that's a very significant pain. He said, yes, I'm used to it. I take a medication for it. It does a little bit, but not that much. So we put patches on his hands, and we start chatting, and for about 45 minutes, and then Clint was there too. So he asked my friend, how do you feel right now? He said, wow, this is interesting. My pain is about 2 and 3 now. And he said, I've never seen that. It doesn't happen in my life anymore. And said, well, this is excellent. This is in the book, by the way. It's, there's an earthing book. And in the book, there's a lot of anecdotal testimonials, and he's one of them. And that impressed me because, I know my friend, he was not lying, And I had another friend coming who was a yoga teacher, and same thing. She had a great result. Another one was a person with multiple sclerosis. She was about 45, and she was coming in the lab in kind of a desperation. She tried everything, and she said, I don't know what to do next. So we decided just to ground her. When she came in, she had a twitch on her left arm. She didn't have the proper control of her left arm, so it was like twitching regularly. And she was pale and obviously not looking like feeling great. So we put her in the recliner and put patches on her hands and feet, start talking with her. About an hour later, she went to the bathroom. And so she came back all excited. She said, my face is pink again. And she was taking her 2 hands and, slapping her face like, oh, look, my face is beautiful. And I was wondering, wow, this is interesting. Her face was very important, of course, but she has regained control of your left arm. And to me, it was like, wow, this would have been the most significant thing for me. But, everybody is different. And this is in the book also. But these are things that I witnessed. And since then, that was like in 2006, I would say. But since then, I've seen so many things, happen to positive thing happen to so many people, including myself.
Dr. Chevalier,
Yes.
let me pause you right there, because where I would really like to dig into the mechanics of what is happening.
That was the quest of Clint Over when he came to see us. How does it work, and why does it work? So we did some research, and he also got the interest of Dr. Sinatra, Stephen Sinatra, who is a cardiologist. And so on my side, I studied the Earth, how the Earth, electrically, how is it working, and even though I didn't know that much, I have background in physics, so I started studying, geomagnetism and the geoelectricity, and I found out that the Earth is like a battery. It has a negative pole and a positive pole. The negative pole is the surface of the Earth. and the positive pole is about 60 miles up in the atmosphere in a layer that is called the ionosphere. And it's called ionosphere because ions are electrically charged particles. Now, those ions are created up there by the sun. The sun rays, UV rays, are strong enough that they split, the molecules of air and make them positively and negatively charged. Now, this is a long story, but the negative charge, which is electrons, and I see your symbol with quantum yoga. It looks like an atom in there,
yeah.
And it's pretty fitting because the nucleus is positively charged, as you know, and the outside you have the electrons orbiting around, and it is those electrons that are mobile and can move and do, for example, chemical reaction. In a chemical reaction, you exchange electrons. So the same thing happened here is that you have in the atmosphere these positive and negative charges, and through a complex process that includes lightning, thunderstorm and lightning, the negative charge is transferred to the surface of the Earth, mainly through lightnings. Lightnings themselves are basically, it's like the Earth breaking down, and you have a huge spark between the ionosphere and the surface of the Earth. It's like when you walk on a carpet and it's dry and you touch a knob and you get a spark. Well, that's the same thing as the Earth level. So imagine how much voltage difference that needs to be built up. What happened is that in the atmosphere, because of the transfer of charge and complex mechanism, there's a huge electrical potential between the surface of the Earth and the ionosphere. So in fair weather, it's about 250 to 500 kilovolts. Now, during thunderstorm, it goes to million volts. So anyway, I was studying that and found out that, yes, it's well known in geology and in geophysics that the Earth, the surface of the Earth, is full of electrons, the negative charge, and that the ionosphere up there is charged positively. On the other hand, Dr. Sinatra was looking at what Clint was telling him and what we found, and he had this idea that maybe what earthing does is quenching inflammation. Then we researched that more with him and the biologist, biophysicist James Oshman, and we found out that basically those electrons, the body has systems to bring in those electrons, and those electrons have antioxidant properties. It's the natural way and the normal way to get antioxidants. So what we found is that it quenches inflammation, and it's very powerful. We had people coming, like, for example, one of the things we were doing is in a workshop, we would ground 400 people. We provide them a patch, and they put them in an area of pain. Normally, most area of pains, there's two types of pains. One is the healing pain, which like normally it's itchy and it's normal, it's needed. Another pain is inflammatory pain, which is very painful, drives people crazy, and it's the body breaking down basically. And so the body knows it and goes into a panic mode. Well, it turns out that putting a patch on a region of inflammation is very effective at reducing inflammation there and at getting rid of the pain. So the mechanism is very complex, but basically it involves the way that we generate energy in our body. So every cells of our body has an energy producing unit called a mitochondrion. Now inside there's a cycle called the Krebs cycle, which is designed for so that the mitochondrion can produce ATP, a molecule, the molecule that basically carries energy around the body and that is used to repair the body and for us to function. Interestingly, this ATP, what makes it powerful or give us energy is that it has electrons in an excited state, and energized electrons. So what happens in our modern life is that being disconnected with the earth and eating processed food, we ingest a lot of positive charge. And positive charge, basically, our food is not electrically neutral. It's charged positively. The air is charged positively also when we breathe in, because there's a huge potential, as I said, between the surface of the earth and the ionosphere. And the potential, which is like by convention, 0 at the surface of the earth, go up by 100 volts for every 3 feet. So people don't know, and they're not zapped. I mean, this is like comparable to the 120 volts in our home. But we're not zapped because the electric charge is extremely small in the atmosphere. Nevertheless, we breathe in some of those positive charge all the time. And the metabolism produce also oxidative, what we call oxidative stress, which is again positive charges. And so they need to be neutralized regularly. And that's why, antioxidants are important. What they do is they neutralize oxidation in the body. And oxidation is the molecules that oxidize are molecules that are seeking electrons. They are electron deficient. So the nature has provided a natural way for us to get those electrons. Now, another thing that is related to inflammation is how the immune system functions. The immune system, for example, the innate immune system, if a bacterium comes in our body, the innate immune system goes and attack it with acids, with molecules, cytokines and other stuff, the molecules that are basically stripping the bacteria of its electrons and killing it. But these are positively charged molecules again, and they need to be neutralized. So the body system needs to get those electrons so that it can rebalance, the electric charge inside the body. So we really bioelectric bodies. We really we know already our nervous system functions bioelectrically, but it's true for the entire body. Wow. So we found that it's extremely important to have a source of these electrons. I mean, another good source of these electrons is natural food that is grown on the soil. Like gardeners, I have many gardeners says, it's so soothing for me to go and work in the garden. Yes, they are grounded all the time that they work in the garden. And then they eat tomatoes and vegetables that they grow in their garden, which are negatively charged. And so that gives you energy.
Is there any relationship between grounding and collecting these electrons from the surface of the Earth and the Schumann resonance? Because as I understand it, this Schumann resonance of roughly 7.83 hertz is created as a resonance in the ionosphere as well. It's also part of this system.
Yes, it's part of the system. So what happens is that we have continuous lightning on somewhere in the world. A lot of them happens in Africa and South America. And unfortunately, we're damaging South America by cutting the trees and stuff. But it's still, two main places where lightning happens regularly, discharging electrons into the earth. But another phenomenon is that lightning also send electromagnetic waves around the earth. And if you calculate using the speed of light and the circumference of the earth, you will find out that the light can and any electromagnetic waves can circumvent the Earth about 7.5 times in a second. So that's about the Schumann resonance. So the Schumann resonance is created by electromagnetic field that are sent out by lightning regularly and is maintained by lightning. So you can see that how important the thunderstorms are in the process of maintaining life on Earth. Now, we grew up, with the negative charge at the surface. We grew up also, evolve is probably the best word. We evolve also with the Schumann resonance being present. And our brain is naturally entrained to that frequency. It just happened that 7.8 hertz is right in the alpha band of brain waves. Now, you have the beta band, which is the one that most people function during their day, which is, I think, above about 14 hertz. And then you have below that, you have the alpha wave, which is very calm, and it's a calming wave. In fact, there's a book that was written called The Power of Alpha Thinking. Because when we are relaxed and our brain waves generate electricity, in the alpha realm, then we are relaxed, we think more clearly, and that's an adaptation of our physiology to the Schumann resonance. Now, this is quite different than being in contact with the surface of the Earth, but it's another benefit that is quite important. There's a third one I want to mention that we still have to elucidate because, so we have the Schumann resonance, which is an obvious resonance or an obvious frequency, but we have other frequencies. And like, for example, we have very low frequencies that change daily. We have those by seasons. And what we found is that, let's say somebody flies from Los Angeles to Paris. Now, there's a jet lag, and people, they get tired and they seem out of synchronicity. What we found, and many travelers found, if you put your bare feet on the ground for 30 minutes in the new location, your body immediately adapts. Well, immediately, in 30 minutes. It adapts after 30 minutes. It looks like the internal clocks inside the body adjusted to the area you're with, and you no longer have jet lags. You go to bed and you are in synchronicity. So there's other frequencies that our body knows how to analyze to determine what time of the day it is and kind of like where you are on the planet. And so we're not certain about those, but we know that there are other frequencies that affect our physiology that we need to study. But Schumann resonance is the most obvious one.
And there's also a gigantic magnetic field that's created by the Earth. Does this influence at all these electrons that you're getting, or would you consider that an entirely separate force that's impacting the body?
It's another force that is, I would not say entirely separate, but they are different, I give you an example. If you have electricity flowing in a wire, okay? So the electricity is there, and it's a flow of electrons. In any wire, it's a flow of electrons. But a flow of electrons generate a magnetic field around it. So there would be also a magnetic field around, the wire. So the Earth is kind of like that. You have inside the Earth electric charge that moves. And these electric charge that move inside create a geomagnetic field. Now, we know that this geomagnetic field also has importance because people, animals or people have put in mu metal rooms. A mu metal is a special metal that is able to prevent magnetic field from traversing it. Most of the metals or materials that we use, the magnetic field penetrates through them. Even though the electric field does not, the magnetic field penetrates. But if you cut the magnetic field of the Earth, the geomagnetic field, and you make a room with this special mu metal thing that prevents that people get ill. They feel bad after about an hour or two. They said, let me out of there. I'm feeling dizzy. And so there is a role for the geomagnetic field also. We know the animals use it to determine where they are on the planet, like especially the migratory, birds that goes long distance. We have magnetites inside our brain in animals too that probably are used in some ways to determine something about the position where we are on Earth or what we do. It's still an area of research, but we also feed on the geomagnetic field of the Earth. I have anecdotal evidence related to that. Years ago, I was in contact with Valerie Hunt from UCLA, who became well known for his research in subtle energy, especially the Rolfing studies in the 70s. And she said, there is a place, a boat, a cruise that you can take, and it brings you, and a lot of people who take that cruise actually have physical problems. And they are, of course, wealthy. So they learn about this cruise, and you take this cruise, and it brings you exactly in somewhere in Pacific, where is the geomagnetic pole. I think it's the South Pole, because the magnetic pole and the physical pole of the planets are not totally aligned. So the geomagnetic pole is in somewhere in, I think it's the north geomagnetic pole is in somewhere in Pacific. When people get close to that area, the density of magnetic field increases, and people get better. They feel like they lose some years. Some people had difficulty walking, walk better, and they go there because they feel better. So we do have, we do feed also on the geomagnetic field of the Earth.
Traditional Chinese medicine, they're talk a lot about the kidney 1 point at sort of the below the knuckles of the toes, right there in the center of the foot, as that assimilation point. Can you expand, or do you have any comments on that?
Yes, I do. The first comments is that it's a common mistake to think that we absorb negative ions from the feet, but a negative ion or a positive ion is a molecule that is negatively charged or positively charged. For example, if you go in a forest and the forest or close to an ocean, you have their negative ions floating in the air, and you breathe them in, and it feels great. And the ocean is especially rich in negative ions. But when you are in contact with the Earth, it's not negative ions that you're receiving. It's electrons, much smaller than negative ions. Just a little bit of clarification. Now, interestingly, kidney 1 point is a very important point. We did a lot of research by using that point. And I would like to mention two things about that. It is known in physiology that the feet have more nerve endings per square centimeter than any other part of the body. Why is it so? The other thing is that we know that kidney 1 from our research, and in fact, one of the papers that I mentioned already, one of the first papers that we did where we measured the energy flow in the meridians, we were measuring the energy flow in the kidney meridian, and it was clear, that it's a very effective meridian to bring in, the electrons of the body. So there's mechanisms, and they are to be active mechanism that brings the electrons into the body. So when the electrons come into the body, they're not just circulating like this. They hop onto a molecule that brings them to probably the nerve system or to the blood flow through some regions of the body where they come in. We know it's a slow process. because we know that if a person gets grounded, let's say a person has hip problems, and we ground the person by putting their feet on the mat. It takes about 20 minutes for the inflammation on the hips or the pain that the person feels on the hips to go away. So it takes some time. It's much faster if you put the patch directly on the region of inflammation. That's what we're saying, because we have a lot of regions of inflammation in our body that we don't know of and that are not painful because it's a very low-key inflammation. We live like that. We're used to live like that in our modern society. So if you have a region of pain, then take a patch, like the earthing.com sells patches that are very cheap, like $20 for 50. You put one patch on that, and the patch has to be grounded too, The patch has a wire that connects it to the earth. You are definitely in contact with the earth. And then the electrons come in, and the inflammation is quenched very, very fast. So by the Meridian system is certainly a system by which the electrons come in and are transferred to the body. The hands is also have a lot of nerve endings, and of course it's the next one that will touch the earth, most often after the feet.
The way I understand this, right, you're talking a lot about what we're picking up and pulling from the earth and these free electrons, right? This is the primary mechanism of neutralizing inflammation, free radicals, sort of balancing bioelectricity from being disconnected. Yet there also seems to be another mechanism that's happening for people living indoors around electric wiring. If I take for example, if I get just a simple voltmeter and I put the ground into the ground of the outlet and I hold on to the hot in my hand, where I'm standing right here, I'll see probably something like 10 millivolts register on the voltmeter, this being me ungrounded, right? So it looks like I'm absorbing something ambiently from the wiring in the walls. Can you talk at all about that?
Yes, that's another complex subject, because the power coming into the wall is at 60 hertz. And so it basically, those wires radiate electromagnetic field that, travel at the speed of light and wiggle 60 times per second. Now, it's the electric field, and it's called an electromagnetic field or EMF, because a varying electric field produces a magnetic field and vice versa. So that's an electromagnetic field, and that sustains itself for long distances. So what happens is that you have these electric and magnetic field or electromagnetic field that we are exposed to in our homes. And what they do is that when they hit the body and we have charge in the body, it's not neutral. The electric field, especially the electric field part of the EMF, will make our electric charge inside our body or near the surface, because they don't penetrate very, very deep, except the magnetic field does. It's a very complex subject, but anyway, it makes our electron wiggles, and then when you ground the grounding electrode, and then you put the meter to AC voltage, and you touch the positive or the red LED, then you may have several volts actually showing up. If you're close to a lamp, I've seen 7-10 volts even. So this is generated by the EMFs on our body. And is it healthy? Well, it's not natural, for sure. And the other thing is that when we are outside, remember though that when we are outside in, let's say, in the woods and stuff like that, there are some EMF also. For example, the Schumann Resonance is carried by an electromagnetic field. It's not like they don't exist, but they're not as intense that they are in our homes. And if your body, what we found is that if your body, you're already sick, those EMF may aggravate your condition. I mean, they're not good for you. But what we found is that healthy people don't have much problems with that. But that's a different story. You know, I studied that on my own. It's not really earthing per se. It's more the effect of electromagnetic field on modern life. I can say this, though, is that when you are grounded, you make your body work with optimal energy and function, and you are best protected against anything, you know, that could happen and that would generate stress, even electromagnetic fields from man-made, you know, appliances or, you know, power. So does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. I'd like to point to one of these studies that you have a couple actually on your research page around the effects of grounding on blood viscosity. And I recently did a live blood cell analysis, and one of the things that the practitioner was pointing at was the membranes of the red blood cells and how buoyant they are, or how much they're pushing away from each other, how polarized they are as a result of their charge, the cell membrane charge. And I wonder, is this related to blood viscosity? Is this related to earthing and grounding?
Yes, this is very much related. So it started again with Dr. Sinatra, wanting to see if earthing changes, the clumping of the cells, if we could see a difference in the blood by doing live blood analysis. So he set up, friends coming in, and Clint was there. And so he had a microscope. I was not there, by the way. I was told that, by Clint and Dr. Sinatra himself. And so he looked at everybody. And so most of the people have their blood, clumped, and, these rouleau formation that are typical of blood that is clotting, And so, but there was one exception, Clint Ober. His red blood cells were separated, they were flowing right easily. And when you have the red blood cells separated like that, the blood is very fluid. When you have them clump, you have the red blood cell clump together, then the blood becomes thick like ketchup, and it doesn't flow so easy. So it was interesting because Clint was grounding for many years. Then what they did is they ground the other people, and they saw an improvement in their blood. So they wanted, Dr. Sinatra first talked to me and wanted to do a study on live blood analysis. But I thought that we can do that, and we did, but I thought that we need a more quantitative way of, determining the effect of earthing on the blood. And so by studying a little bit, I found that the blood is what is called a colloidal solution. What is a colloidal solution? It's a liquid that has particles floating in it, like milk, paint. These are colloidal solution. And there's interesting properties of those colloidal solution. Sorry. Is that the particles inside the colloidal solution have to have enough charge to repel each other enough to stay suspended in the liquid. You can, for example, put, like an acid into milk, and it will coagulate, and it will become like, I forgot the term, but basically there's a part of the milk that will condense and become solid. So the same thing with the blood. So I found that what the specialists in rheology, the science of colloidal solutions, called rheology, and it's very important for our health, especially in water treatment plants. They need to separate, all kind of goo or whatever is in the water from and keep only pristine water. So they have specialists in rheology. So I was studying that, and I found that the critical parameter that I need to measure is called zeta potential. It's basically a way to measure the charge at the surface, the effect of the charge at the surface of a red blood cell. So basically, healthy red blood cells are charged negatively. They repel each other. They float neatly in the blood as separated, and the blood is like, wine, flows really easy. But if you lack negative charge, then all over the body, then the red blood cells will lack electric charge too. And so the power to repel each other will decrease. And then some other forces that can enter into count, like called the van der Waals forces, and some other molecules inside the blood, like fibrins and other molecules that will tend to make the red blood cell clump. And that's not healthy. So there were some equipment to measure zeta potential, but they were very expensive. So I devised a simple way of measuring zeta potential with a microscope and gold bars. And anyway, it's in the paper. And so we decided to measure zeta potential before and after earthing or grounding. And what we found, and these people were grounded for about 2 hours. It was like a little longer. But what we found is that on average, the zeta potential increased by 2.7 times, almost 3 times. So that we increased the charge basically on the surface of the red blood cell by about 3 times, and that changed completely. How the blood flow. It's huge. So that means that the people are having blood. One of the reason they have cardiovascular problems is just because the blood is clumping together, deposit, especially in areas where the flow is slow, and then forming plaque there. And it's easy when there's not enough electric charge. So it's as a great deal. Grounding has a great help to maintain your heart function, and also the heart itself. It's much more difficult for the heart to pump ketchup than to pump wine. So it also affects the heart itself and the entirety of the cardiovascular system.
So that's so fascinating. I'm glad you brought up the zeta potential. So when one is looking at live blood cell analysis, you're seeing this rouleau. You're observing a low zeta potential.
Correct. That's
Got
right.
it. Wow, fascinating. And this also so something popped up in my head. Now, would this be the mechanism behind why some people have issues with clotting when they're flying long distances high in the ionosphere?
Well, the higher you go up in the air, the higher the electrical voltage is. I mean, if it's 100 volt per 3 feet, that means 1,000 volts at 30 feet. So when you go way up there, it goes high. And interestingly, so when we are in a plane, we're not grounded, of course. And so, we're exposed to air, probably, because the plane has to let some air in from the atmosphere surrounding. It's probably very positively charged. The other thing also related to that, if I may, is people living in high-rise building. There's numerous studies that shows that these people on higher floors have more health problems than those living on lower floors. So, and they found that even after taking into account, the air quality may be less, there might be mold in the ventilation system, whatever. So they took all that into account, and still people were sicker. They have no explanation. It's just baffling them. So our explanation would be, well, even if they live out there, they have ventilation system, bring air from the outside. Probably if you are on the 10th floor, it's maybe like 10,000 volts, who knows, and comes into your your apartment and you're breathing that. So that's our hypothesis. That's not been verified, but what has been verified is that people living in high-rise building have generally, on the highest floor, generally have poorer health than people living close to the ground.
Can we talk more about the mitochondria, if it's possible? Can you can you discuss this more in its role in grounding and bioenergy?
Well, I'll see how far I can go. I'm not a biologist, I am a physicist, engineering physicist by formation. I guess Jim Oshman is the specialist in that, and that we have great papers on that. But basically, the mitochondrion has a complex biochemical process to generate ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is the molecule that is used by the body to carry energy around. So to produce that, the mitochondrion needs oxygen and it needs electrons. And so it ends up somewhat that the oxygen molecule atom is basically, oxygen is an atom that has a high affinity for electrons. I mean, it has very high electronegativity. And so it's the atom that will, even when it's neutral, when it has the number of electrons that it needs, it's still going to try to attract more. It's like, it's not satisfied with what it has ever. So it's used by the body as a sink for electrons. So the electrons goes and they go through the Krebs cycle, and then they end up on the ATP, and then they go through different processes, and then they get finally through the oxygen and neutralize. And oxygen, that's why we call oxidation. Oxidation comes from oxygen. The molecules that are oxidating or oxidative molecules, they have oxygen. And so that's why they attract electrons. The oxygen is very electronegative. It loves electrons. And so we need electrons to neutralize and keep them quiet, And so, but it's used in the entire body, also as in the immune system, for the immune system to function. But going back to the mitochondrion, that's basically the function of the mitochondrion, is to produce ATP from electrons and from also the oxygen using in the process. So that's as much I know about mitochondrion and how it works and how it generates. So basically, it's a factory for producing ATP.
When we were talking earlier about the zeta potential, one thing that occurred to me is that, so obviously gathering these electrons, right, through grounding and other means are going to increase the amount of electrons and the electrostatic charge that exists in these cell membranes. Wouldn't it also be very important that the cell membrane itself, the phospholipid bilayer that makes up these cell membranes, that they actually be made from quality fats? That this is an issue as well, kind of plays into you talking about food and eating real food versus some other kind of fats. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Okay, well, I have two thoughts came on that. One is about the electric charge of the food itself. So you want to eat food that is electrically negatively charged. Basically, like you were saying, there's a very inexpensive device to measure electron content called ORP measuring device, oxidation reduction potential, and that's what you measure. So if it has a negative ORP, then you're eating something that is going to give you energy. And if it's positive, then it's going to be the opposite. The other thing is now we have introduced also something new that didn't exist in the past. And now we engineer molecules that did not exist in the past. We also modify our food, genetically modified, organisms and food that produce effects that are unfamiliar to the body. In while some company says it's safe, etc., I'm still very skeptical about that. My own experience is rather negative. That we used a lot of corn, and we used GMO corn, and it didn't have a good effect on us. So I don't know. I don't want. It's not my thing. But the fact is that now in the food we have two effects happening. We have also something that existed a long time ago, and it's still there. Is that you have elements that are, detrimental for the body, that are toxic to the body, like mercury,
Aluminum's another
aluminum, and there's another big one. And so anyway, so you have these, but these toxins were there around in the past, and the body has normally, when it's healthy, it has mechanisms to take care of that. But when it's not healthy, they accumulate there. So you have these things, and we have additional challenges. Is that processed food has a definitely tendency to be deprived of electrons. So that's a problem. Besides the other nutrient depriving, the change in the modification that is not natural. So properly functioning bioelectrical system. And like for example, you take any equipment, I would take an example of very sophisticated equipment like an oscilloscope, or it's true for a TV or anything. It has to have a ground to function properly. There is a place that is called the 0 point energy, if you will, and every electrical potential is calculated and determined relative to this point. For example, the surface of the Earth is 0. Now, what happened is that the immune system needs that information to determine what's self, what is non-self. So what happens when we live long time not grounded is that everything becomes positively charged, and the nuances of different charge of the different molecules go away, and the immune system is like working in a fog now, trying to determine what's self, what's not self. It becomes more and more difficult, and so you have autoimmune disease appearing. It's to me, it's simply a malfunction of the immune system that does not have the electrical grounding. Now we're not talking about necessarily electrons. Electrons are helpful, but now we're talking about the zero potential that is needed, a difference of potential clearly established for an electrical system to function properly. So that's another issue that we face when we're not grounded. So we have, we need the electrons, but a secondary system is that it determines everything what its electrical potential should be. And the immune system knows that. So the immune system itself is a bioelectrical system. And when the bioelectrical system of our body is compromised, then the immune system doesn't know what to do and what is supposed to fight. What is good, what is part of the body, and what is not. It becomes very blurred. So that's our thinking about why autoimmune disease increase so much. Like, in our society, it's grounding. As food and other things have changed. Everything has changed at the same time. But the fact that we're not contacting the Earth is definitely an important factor, part of that.
Well, Dr. Chevalier, thank you so much for coming on the program. Give us your websites, ways that people can get more information about the Earthing Institute, etc.
Okay, so for information on Earthing itself, there is a book called Earthing that was published in 2012. Even more information on the book you can find at the Earthing Institute. It's earthinginstitute.net. So basically it's the word earthing and immediately institute, no space, .net. And if you are interested in knowing the products that can ground you at home, where anywhere you go. You can go to earthing.com and you'll find some projects. So I don't sell products myself unless, a few friends, to help a few friends and stuff. I'm the researcher, but if you are interested in that, I know the information. Also, you can find information on the efficacy of projects and how to use them properly on the Earthing Institute website. But it's mainly educational, and our big thing is that we want whatever way people should get in contact with the Earth every day.